food prep guide. Today we are making salsa, but not just any salsa. We're making zucchini salsa. Now if that sounds odd to you, hear me out. It is amazing, and the reason why is that zucchini, when cooked or soaked in liquid, it takes on whatever liquid that it soaks on. It takes the taste of it. So this zucchini is going to be cooked with some tomatoes, along with onions, peppers, garlic, all the yummy stuff, and you will not be able to tell that this is a largely zucchini based salsa. And the reason why, why even put zucchini in your salsa is because typically it's a lot cheaper than tomatoes, and if you're a home gardener like I am, these zucchini just grow out the wazoo and you have so much left over at the end of the season you don't know what to do with it. Salsa is my new favorite way to use up my zucchini. So I will post this recipe in the description box below. I have doubled it, but I will put the standard recipe in the description box so that you can double or triple it as needed. So the first thing we're going to use is 12 cups of finely chopped zucchini. I use a food processor for all of this. For your zucchini, you're going to slice off the ends, slice it into chunks, place that into your food processor and process. And you're just going to repeat that process as many times as you need in order to get 12 cups. If you have an extra large measuring cup like this, it goes a lot faster. This is an 8-cup measuring cup. I highly recommend it. But you'll just scrape off your everything that you process out of here into here, and then dump that into a bowl. Next is onions. You'll want 4 onions. You can see I only have 3 here. I have a red onion that I will be adding to this, and that brings me to a point that I wanted to address. This recipe is extremely forgiving. If you say the recipe calls for 4 onions, if you only have 2 onions, and you have some dehydrated onions on hand, or you have some red onions on hand, you can mix and match, or you can just do 3 onions and not do the full 4 onion batch. The next step is peppers. You're going to want 4 bell peppers, but again, this recipe is forgiving, so thankful. So I have a lot of dehydrated peppers on hand. I do not have any fresh bell peppers on hand, except for this little guy that just came out of the garden. So this recipe is going to be soaked overnight, and that means you can use dehydrated ingredients with no issues. So instead of 4 bell peppers, I am going to use 6 tablespoons of my dehydrated peppers instead. You can do, whatever you want. If you do regular onions and regular bell peppers, you're just going to run them through your food processor just like you did your zucchini. Put them in your bowl until you have enough of the mixture to meet the recipe requirements. Next is the minced garlic. I just use your typical minced garlic already in water. It's perfectly fine when you're scooping this out, for there to be water in your tablespoon measurement, no big deal. And last but not least is a 1/4 cup of pickling salt. I use strictly sea salt in my canning that has no additives, no fillers, just straight sea salt. But you can definitely use a pickling salt as well. Here is what everything looks like once you've run it through the food processor. As you can see, those dehydrated peppers I was telling you about rehydrated beautifully. I did not have a bowl big enough to hold it all, so there's no reason for the separation here. I just needed an extra bowl because I didn't have enough space in this big one because I doubled the recipe. So the next step is you are going to let this sit out on your counter overnight. This is a 2-day process. So the first step with processing the zucchini and the onions and the peppers and all that, that's going to be day 1. You're going to end up with this, and you're going to let this sit on your counter overnight, at least 10 hours, if not more. And then the next day, which is today, you're going to strain out all the liquid that is in this. So I will take you over to the sink and show you what that looks like. The goal here in this step is to get the zucchini as dry as possible. You want to extract as much of that liquid as possible. So you probably want to do it in small batches. That's usually what I do, and then I just take the spatula and you're just going to press it against the sides of your colander or your strainer and get all of that water out. Now you're not going to get every bit out, and that's perfectly fine, but just as much as you can. The last step, you're going to let it drip while you're prepping all the rest of the stuff, including the tomatoes, so it's okay if you don't, you know, get every ounce of water out in this step, because we're going to be letting it drip drain in the next step, which I will show you in a minute. The next step is to rinse with cold water. You can see I did have those 2 huge bowls, and now I have lost so much volume that it now fits in this one colander, and that'll happen once you drain off your water. You'll notice that your mixture is a lot less. So I'm going to rinse this with cold water. Let that get pretty cold. And the purpose of this is to rinse off all that salt you put in there yesterday. I'm just going to give this a good rinse. And then I'm going to take my spatula and repeat that process of pushing down and removing as much water as possible, and then I will show you the next step. Once you've drained out as much water as you can, the next step is to place your colander over a large stock pot. You could put it straight into your sink, but I have found that if I have the slightest clog in my sink, then as the water drains, the water level will rise to where it starts to sit in the colander. So just to avoid any potential issues there, I have this draining in a stock pot, and this is going to sit here and drain any remaining water while we prep the rest of the salsa. So this probably is going to be sitting here maybe another 40-45 minutes or so. Sorry for the noise in the background. I'm prepping my jars for canning. At this point, we are about 45 minutes to an hour away from canning. So if you will be doing a large batch and canning yourself, now's a good time to start cleaning your jars. Next, we will be preparing the tomato portion of the salsa. So the recipe calls for 6 cups of chopped tomatoes. I will cut away any of the splits or bad parts of any of these tomatoes, and of course the tops. Then I will toss them in this food processor, process them, pour them in here until I have 6 cups, and then that will go directly in our stock pot on the stove to get ready to cook. Since the recipe calls for 6 cups of chopped tomatoes, I wanted to stop here and show you what that looks like and let you know that it took about 4 large tomatoes. So here's my hand. I have a pretty small hand. Pretty big tomatoes. So I took 4 of those. It would probably take 5 to 6 regular sized tomatoes. But I will be doubling this recipe, so I have a little bit more work to do, so I will be back in the next step. We just finished processing the tomatoes, and we put them straight in our stock pot that we will be cooking in just a minute. We're not turning the heat on just yet. We're just using it to store all of our ingredients. The next is to add all the remaining ingredients. So the recipe calls for 2 cans of tomato paste, 6 ounces each. I'm doubling the recipe. I need 4. 1 tablespoon of sea salt, 1 tablespoon each of garlic powder, mustard powder, cumin. It calls for coriander, but I do not have any. A good substitute for coriander is fresh parsley. So this is parsley that we grew in our garden, so I know that it has a very strong taste, just like coriander is a very strong taste, so it'll be a good substitute for this recipe. And then we have 1 teaspoon of pepper, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, or you can also do 2 tablespoons of honey if you prefer that, 1 cup of white vinegar, and 1 cup of either lemon or lime juice. Either or will work just fine. So I'm going to measure all these out and add them to our stock pot, and we'll move on to the next step. Now we have all the rest of the ingredients in our pot. This is what it looks like. I'm just going to give it a good stir with a whisk. I still haven't turned the heat on yet, but we're about to. Just give it a good stir to incorporate all the ingredients really good. Make sure to scrape the sides and the bottom. And now we can turn our heat up to high. And next we're going to add the zucchini, which, if you remember, has been draining in our sink this whole time. So let's go take a look at that. I took our zucchini mixture off, and I wanted to show you how much liquid collected. Pretty decent amount. So that's good. So now our zucchini is as dry as it's going to get, and if it's still just a little bit moisture, no problem at all. The tomato paste that we added to the salsa is to offset any lingering moisture that's in this zucchini relish type mixture, but also to help thicken up the salsa if your tomatoes were particularly juicy. That's what that tomato paste is going to take care of for us. So now we're going to add that to the pot. Here we have the zucchini added to the pot. So we're just going to give that a good stir. Get it good and incorporated. I'm going to continue giving this a good stir, and then I'm going to place the lid on, and we're going to bring it to a hard rolling boil, and I'll show you what that looks like when we get to that point. Also, once you have gotten to this point when you're cooking the salsa, now is the time to go ahead and get your canner water heating up and ready to start canning. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that to medium-high heat and let the canner start warming up for me. I wanted to show you this real quick. It's been cooking for about maybe 7 minutes or so, and as you can see, we're starting to get some bubbling action that kind of seems like it's boiling. But if we give it a good stir, you'll notice that the boiling and bubbling goes away. So we stir it, and let's watch it just for a few seconds. You can see the bubbling doesn't return immediately. So this means it is not at a rolling boil yet. A rolling boil is achieved when you can stir it and it still continues to boil, or at least starts boiling again within just a second or two after stirring. So this still needs to go a little bit longer. As you can see, we are at a good boil. I'm going to stir it so I can show you what I mean about how the rolling boil works. So we give it a good stir and watch what happens. The boiling returns almost immediately, so I'm going to call that good. At this point, we're going to lower our heat to a low simmer for 20 minutes. And we're going to keep it covered, place the lid on while we do that. And I will see you back when we're ready to can. Okay, it has been 20 minutes and our salsa is looking delicious. Oh, I wish this phone had smell-o-vision. This is so good. I've already tasted it. It's perfect. And now it's just a matter of canning. I'll just do one just to review what the process is. So I'm just filling it up. We're going to leave a 1/2 inch headspace. Like I need a little bit more, just a tiny bit more. Don't forget to debubble the salsa. take out just a tiny bit. It's easy to do with just a spoon. Just going to scoop a little bit off because I got a little bit too much. Debubble again. There we go. That's about 1/2 inch headspace. Don't forget to wipe your rims. I did put a little bit of vinegar on my rag today because the brown sugar in this salsa can make it a little bit sticky. So just for added measure, put some vinegar on it instead of just plain water. And the lid and the rings are finger tight, 1 finger tight turn, and it's going to process for 15 minutes. And that's it. I hope you enjoy this salsa. I hope you try it for yourself. It is amazing. It's forgiving. You can really change up the onions and peppers and even seasonings. This is a mild salsa, so if you like spicy, you might want to add some red pepper flakes, maybe even a little bit of chili powder, maybe some jalapenos, something like that. But this is an amazing mild salsa that is stretched with zucchini to make those valuable tomatoes last even longer and stretch even further. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.